Welcome back to the UCL Fantasy Wildcard, this time out of Matchday 10, the second leg of the quarterfinals. If you still have the chip, I'd probably recommend using it in Matchday 11, but it is team dependent. If you have a lot of fires to put out this week or you want to make a lot of changes, then maybe the wildcard could be used right now, and then you have 5 free transfers for the first leg of the semi-finals in Matchday 11, so you could still use it in Matchday 10 and it could still work out very well. But I'm going to talk about the best 50-man squad on the wildcard with my budget, which is 108.2 million, but I will suggest some downgrades you could make if you aren't able to afford this 50-man squad. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's get this video to the 200 likes, and we're literally just a few subscribers away from 23,000, so let's be sure to reach that by the Tuesday. It'd be massively appreciated, and another milestone ticked off. Check out my Twitter and Instagram, follow me on those platforms, DylanRCM. Also consider becoming a patron on patreon.com/DylanRCM. Join as a channel member by clicking the join button, and there's also links to the Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League, and Spotify and Amazon Music. Leave a 5-star review on those platforms and listen to those podcasts. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Coble is the highest scoring goalkeeper in UCL Fantasy, and in my opinion, the best goalkeepers for Matchday 10 are between Coble and Oblak. It all depends on who you back to go through to the next round, and you could argue that Oblak is slightly more likely. Atletico Madrid are currently 2-1 up in the tie, but I think that late goal by Borussia Dortmund puts the tie in the balance, and Borussia Dortmund have a good chance of going through with the second leg being at home, and Coble can still get you 3 or 4 points even if his team concedes. And if I had to back one team for this match day specifically, I would back Borussia Dortmund, and it could be a scenario where Dortmund win 1-0, it goes to extra time and penalties, and it ends up being Atletico Madrid going through, but you get more points from Coble in the process. And this is going to be a bit of a controversial one because both goalkeepers are currently down in the tie. They're both cheap options, but you might have to make a transfer in Matchday 10, and it's not ideal to do that in the goalkeeper position, but I'd still consider Lunin. And what this allows you is going for 2 budget options that have a high ceiling. They can save penalties. They've also been very good in the Champions League this season, and it allows you to spend more money in the outfield players. But if you do have the funds, or you just want to go for a safer option, so to speak, then I'd recommend Ederson or Oblak as your premium goalkeeper. But even with Oblak, I'm not that confident of Atletico Madrid going through after their late goal conceded in the first leg. But for me, the best goalkeepers in Matchday 10 are between Coble and Oblak. I'm going for a budget enabler in the back line who's also a massive differential, Cubarsí, who has been incredible for Barcelona recently. Even as a 17-year-old, he also did a very good job keeping Mbappe quiet in the first leg. I don't trust Barcelona defensively despite keeping 6 clean sheets in a row in La Liga, but against Paris Saint-Germain, I think they will concede, but Barcelona are more likely to go through with the home tie there in their favour, and also being 3-2 up over both legs so far. So with Cubarsí, I would recommend him, but there's also Jules Koundé, and if you have the funds, Joao Cancelo is the standout pick as highlighted in the Best Limitless Team video and podcast. But I think in terms of value and also enabling those players in the midfield position and forwards, I would rather go for Cubarsí on the wild card, but that's certainly down to interpretation, and I still like Jules Koundé a lot as well. Now next up is going to be Maatsen, and I'm doubling up on Borussia Dortmund defensively, and once again it all depends on your preference and predictions for that matchup between Dortmund and Atletico, and whoever you back, I will double up on that team defensively. But if they were to go through, they will face either PSG or Barcelona in the semi-finals, so that might not be the best pick for maybe an option that will reach the final. And also, you wouldn't expect clean sheets in the semi-finals either, but you could say the same thing about any single team or player. But Maatsen is a decent option. Just bear in mind, he's already 1 yellow card away from suspension. He's a bit of a yellow card magnet. He only joined in January, but he is a good UCL fantasy option, and if funds are no issue, then Mats Hummels is a clear upgrade because he is a ball recovery machine and he's the highest scoring UCL fantasy defender. Now the third option I'm going to go for is Molina, but you could argue that he's far too expensive, but he has been very consistent. He's averaging almost 5 points per match day. He always seems to find a way to get returns. Even if Atletico Madrid concede, he can win penalties, get the odd ball recovery point, and get assists. So I really like Molina. He's one of the best right wing backs in world football right now, and if I had to pick between him and Oblak as your premium Atletico Madrid defensive coverage, I would pick Molina at this moment in time. Now, the fourth defender I'm going for scored a great goal, his first one for Man City at the Bernabeu. He followed that up at the weekend with a goal and assist against Luton Town. And I'm talking about Gvardiol, who, beyond the goals and assists he's getting recently, he is so good for ball recovery points, and that's what separates him from every other Man City defender. The problem is Nathan Ake is now back, and Man City pretty much have a fully fit squad, so Gvardiol could be a rotation risk, but with the form he's in, I don't expect him to be dropped on Wednesday against Real Madrid. I think he's going to start that game, and he could also start both games in the semi-finals and potentially the final itself if Man City were to reach those stages. So Gvardiol is my favourite Man City defender. Ruben Dias is probably second. He's very nailed on, but he's also one yellow card away from suspension, and these yellow cards reset in Matchday 11. So it's between those two to cover that Man City defence, and I think they will concede to Real Madrid, but they certainly have the advantage and they're more likely to reach the semi-finals and also to win the competition. Now, the fifth and final defender is a very tricky one, and I have to say I originally had a certain player in from the best performing defence in Europe in recent times, especially in this calendar year, but I have to say I have reconsidered it, and in the last couple of games Arsenal have been far too shaky. Against Bayern Munich they were gifting goals, conceding some big chances. They did the same thing against Aston Villa, lost that game, and I do think that could be the start of Arsenal crumbling like they did last season. So I was originally going to go for Saliba, but right now I'd actually favour, and this might sound really crazy and maybe you disagree, that's completely fair enough, but I'd actually consider going for a Bayern Munich defender like Eric Dyer. I would give them the advantage anyway, and I said this in my Wildcard team video and podcast, which was recorded before the Arsenal versus Aston Villa game, and now I'm even more confident of Bayern Munich going through. I don't expect a clean sheet necessarily, but it is possible at the Allianz Stadium, and Dyer is a very cheap enabler at 4.5 million, and it can open up the avenues in terms of budget to make some improvements elsewhere, and one of those improvements could be Maatsen to Hummel. So I have gone for Eric Dyer right now. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you disagree, that's completely understandable. Ultimately, I don't expect any team to keep clean sheets in match day 10, and the most likely would be Borussia Dortmund in my opinion. Jude Bellingham is another suspension risk, one more yellow card, and he will miss out in the first leg of the semi-finals, and Real Madrid could severely miss Tchouameni, who was yellow carded within the first minute of that first leg. He's going to miss the Etihad match, but Bellingham is still a great UCL fantasy option, and even if Man City are the favourites to progress, I would still recommend going for at least one Real Madrid attacker in Vinicius or Bellingham, perhaps even both, and Bellingham is still the best midfielder in the game until his side is eliminated. Now, the second midfield I'm going to go for is Witsel as a budget option, but you can still go for Zaire Emery. It's just I think PSG's chances of going through are slimmer than Atletico Madrid's, and Zaire Emery also has just come back from an injury. He came on as a sub in the first leg, and he hasn't been in great form in Ligue 1 throughout the entire calendar year. He was looking much better around November and December, and he was a great option in the group stages, but Witsel is a steady choice, getting you 4 to 5 points every single match day. So I have gone for the Belgian. He is playing as a defender, but that's not too relevant in UCL Fantasy because the ball recoveries make Witsel a good option. Now, the third midfielder I'm going to go for is one of the best talents in world football. He hasn't been great in the Champions League so far this season in terms of goals and assists, but I really think he can make a difference in the second leg, and that's going to be Musiala against Arsenal. And look, Arsenal can still turn up, and maybe it would be the wrong call to go for Dyer over Saliba. And look, you can't fully discount Arsenal. They're still a good team with a lot of potential, but I would give Bayern Munich the edge, and I do think Musiala is a good option at this price. He hasn't been great in UCL Fantasy though, admittedly, but I'm expecting big things from him in the big stages, and if it doesn't come this year and in this game, it will happen eventually. It's only a matter of time for me. Now, there are two midfielder slots left, and one of them is essential right now in my opinion. He's the best Man City asset and arguably the best midfielder on current form, and that's Phil Foden. I'm quite surprised that his ownership is only 23%. I thought it would be quite higher. Maybe by the time we get to the semi-final stage, and if Man City have gone through, I think Foden will become a very template option at that point. And the final midfielder is Saka. Even if Bayern Munich go through, and if you're backing Bayern for the win, I still think Saka can do something on the counter-attack, and also he has stepped up for Arsenal many times throughout his career. You could argue that during crunch time in the final weeks of the season, like in the last campaign, he didn't really appear. He was quite anonymous, but he did score in the first leg against Bayern Munich, and I think he's the best Arsenal asset right now, and I would diversify things a little bit, and it's always a decent thing to go for one or two players from teams you expect to be eliminated. But this game between Bayern and Arsenal is still almost 50-50, but I would give Bayern the edge now, and in my opinion it would be around 60-40 in Bayern's favour at the very least. But Saka is still a good option nonetheless, and there's a very nice midfield. You've got Musiala, Foden, Saka and Bellingham as the four young starlets who have a lot of attacking potential, and Witsel for the consistent ball recoveries at that price point. Choosing forwards in UCL Fantasy is always a difficult proposition, but in my opinion, the best forward for Matchday 10 is Harry Kane. He's at home to Arsenal, who have been good in 2024. In fact, they've probably been one of the best teams in Europe. But the way they're playing in the last week, the vulnerabilities they showed against Bayern Munich in the first leg, and that also went to the Premier League against Aston Villa, that gives me more confidence about Harry Kane delivering once again against the Gunners. And I think he's going to be the top UCL Fantasy pick in the forward line. He's also got the most points of any UCL Fantasy player with 61 points. You can't discount Arsenal completely. They still have a chance, but I think Harry Kane will deliver no matter what that final result will be, whether Bayern Munich progress or if they are eliminated at the quarterfinal stage. So go for Harry Kane if possible. You won't regret it. I think he is the best UCL Fantasy forward for Matchday 10. Now it becomes very difficult to pick the other two forwards, and from the Tuesday, I'd be very tempted by Rafinha, Lewandowski and Mbappe, and of course you've still got the likes of Griezmann, who I backed in Matchday 9, but not so much in an away game for Matchday 10. So I would go for one of those players from PSG or Barcelona as one of your forwards, but I'm going to go for more reliable picks in my opinion in Vinicius Jr., who's been so consistent this season. He's another suspension risk to be fair, but he's got a good record against Man City. He got 2 assists in the first leg back in Matchday 9, but the final forward slot, I didn't back him in Matchday 9. I thought he'd blank, which he ended up doing, but now I'm backing him to do very well. He has returned in every single home game in the Champions League this season, and that's Erling Haaland, who is one of the most template picks you'll find, but his ownership has gone down from 65% to 56% over the last week or so, but I am backing him in this home game. Now, with selling Mbappe to Erling Haaland, which I might do in my own team selection, that could be a mistake, and I'll talk about that in the team selection video and podcast. And one problem you could find with this wildcard squad is the lack of Tuesday players, particularly in the midfield or forward line. And if you aren't a big fan of that, then what you could do is buy Mbappe, Rafinha or Lewandowski for one of these forwards, perhaps even for two of them. And if I had to drop one of these forwards, it would be Vinicius Jr., but you could make a case for dropping Haaland instead. I certainly wouldn't drop Harry Kane. He's in this team no matter what. It's all about those final two forward slots, and it's down to personal preference and how you want to structure your team. Ideally, you'd go for 8 players on the Tuesday and 7 on the Wednesday, but it could be a balance of 9 to 6, and sometimes it could be 7 to 8. It's not too shabby. As long as you don't have 11 plus players playing on the Tuesday, which does reduce the impact of your substitutions, and the imbalance isn't great on paper. But apart from that, it's not that important. It's something worth considering when building your wildcard squad or your limitless, and also just in general when you're making your transfers. But the final thing to discuss, as I talked about in the best limitless team video and podcast, is the captaincy. So for the Tuesday, there aren't many options, and that's where you might have to go for a defender. I mean, you don't really have another choice, do you? Apart from that, you've got the goalkeeper in Kobel, and I would consider captaining from these 15 players, probably Molina or Maatsen. But if you aren't happy with that and you want a better captaincy option for the Tuesday, I'd highly recommend going for a midfielder or forward from one of those teams. And if I were to make a change, it would be Vinicius Jr. out for either Lewandowski, Rafinha or Mbappe. And as I mentioned in the best limitless team, I'd probably go for Lewandowski. He's got Champions League pedigree and he's in great form since Xavi announced that he's leaving at the end of the season. So if you wanted to go for something like that, then Lewandowski, Rafinha or Mbappe, take your pick. That will be my captain for the Tuesday. And for the Wednesday, I'd probably go for Harry Kane right now at this moment in time, but I would be tempted by Foden and Erling Haaland. And of course, you never know, Bellingham and Saka are capable of some big things, but I would probably go for Kane as the Wednesday captain. Typically in UCL Fantasy and FPL, you would want to captain a midfielder for the extra point for scoring a goal and the clean sheet point potentially, but I think forwards in UCL Fantasy are always very tempted to captain, and that's why I'd go for your Tuesday pick in terms of forwards that I mentioned, and on the Wednesday, Harry Kane as probably the best captaincy option or match day 10. Now with 1.7 million in the bank, there are some opportunities to make some upgrades. Eric Dyer to Saliba or Joao Cancelo is something that springs to mind, and it all depends on your predictions. And you could also go for Kobel up to Oblak directly, but I think the two upgrades I would make with this setup is Witsel and Maatsen out, and it might not seem like massive changes, but Rodri coming in for Witsel is probably an upgrade. Rodri has more attacking potential, despite also having the ball recoveries like Witsel. I think Rodri just has more to his game in UCL Fantasy, and the other option would be in the defence, a kind of like-for-like replacement in Hummels instead of Maatsen. He's also a suspension risk, but Hummels is a ball recovery machine, and even if Dortmund go out, Hummels can give you 4 to 5 points despite Atletico Madrid maybe scoring a goal at the Signal Iduna Park. So those are two possible changes you could make. I would have 0 million left in the bank after making those two upgrades, but it's all down to your personal preference. Vinicius Jr. instead of Lewandowski. You could also go for Sane or De Bruyne instead of Musiala. There's a lot you could do with the extra funds if you have anything left over from what I showed you earlier. But thank you very much for watching this video and listen to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's get this video to the 200 likes and let's keep on pushing towards 23,000 subscribers and beyond. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for the Patreon, Championships Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League, and check out Spotify and Amazon Music. Leave a 5-star review on those podcasts. It'd be greatly appreciated. As always, I wish you all the best of luck for match day 10 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.